welcome to Researcher Revealed. This is the podcast where we go behind just the name that's on a paper or a poster or a conference talk and find out who they are and why they got into research. On today's episode, we have the very lovely and very busy Diane visiting us. She's a pharmacist, a credentialed consultant pharmacist, and she's got so many jobs. Look in the episode description in order to see like the full breadth of the jobs as well as honorary roles that she holds. And yeah, I invited her on the podcast today because we were at a postdoc event together in London, and I was just really impressed with her ability to stand up for her profession and to make sure that that voice was heard. And so I wanted to get to know her a little bit better and also hear more about her research. This episode is the result. I hope you enjoy. On today's episode, we have the very lovely Professor Diane joining us. Diane, can you introduce yourself and tell everybody out there listening or watching who you are, what you do as a clinical background?
Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. So my name is Diane Ashiru-Oredope. I'm the lead pharmacist for Antimicrobial Resistance at UK Health Security Agency. I do wear a few hats, so I'm going to just share with you the other hats that I wear. I'm the Deputy Chief Scientist 1 day a week at the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and I'm also Honorary Chair and Professor of Pharmaceutical Public Health at University of Nottingham. I do have other academic hats at UCL School of Pharmacy and Imperial College. And I'm also a mum. I've got 2 teenagers who keep me very busy outside of work, and I'm married to 1 man.
Ah, wow. Oh my goodness. We are definitely going to have to talk about this later in the podcast after you share your research journey, because that is a lot of hats, balls, bits of life that you juggle. So I'm really interested to hear about how you manage to have a balance and not go crazy. Dare I say?
I can share more. I call it a blend rather than balance, but we can get there a bit later.
Yeah, put a pin in it. Don't give away too much. Don't give away too much. Before we get into the episode, we're going to run through the Rapid 11, which is just 11 quick questions about you, how you work. Nothing personal, just a little bit of getting to know how you go about doing the work around research. Are you ready?
I think so.
They're honestly not that scary. Question number 1. Do you use a Windows or a Mac computer?
Windows. I can't deal with Mac.
Do you drink tea or coffee?
Tea. The only time I drank coffee in my life was when I went to do a program management course, and it was 5 days straight, and that drove me to drink neat coffee. Other than that, it's tea. And when I have my mocha, I tell them I only want half a shot of coffee, not a shot, half a shot. So tea, definitely.
Nice. Oh, girl after my own heart. I'm a very dedicated tea drinker. When you're writing, do you prefer to have music in the background or silence?
Silence.
Ooh, nice.
Silence, yes.
Where do you tend to do your work? At home or in an office?
At the moment, at home. I became a remote worker in 2017 before COVID. So I have worked quite a bit at home for a while.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So you were a pre-remote worker before remote working was the thing. Interesting.
Although in those days, I still went in about 3 days a week, but I was a remote worker.
Nice. Very cool. What time of day, so not like hour, but like morning, afternoon, night, do you feel you're the most productive?
In the middle of the night, around if I can do it really well, my best time is probably from about 1 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the morning.
What? Oh my word, that's incredible.
That's my favorite time because everybody's asleep. The house is absolutely quiet. Yes, I love it. And
your brain actually functions then? Wow.
I may have a quick nap. In the past, what I did was I would have a quick nap for about an hour between 11 and 12, and then I stay awake until the morning and then go back to have a sleep if I need to.
Wow. Oh, I'm
As
that
I've gotten older,
wow.
though, it's a little bit more challenging.
The fact you've done it at all, like hats off to you. I'm one of those people who I am not a nighttime person at all. Like, I mean, if I'm out at a party or whatnot, I can manage being up late. But like to work overnight, like when I first started nursing and I had to do night shifts, I like would feel ill in the middle of the night. They did not agree with me at all. So
Yeah.
I'm very impressed. Very
I
cool,
think we're
very
all just
interesting.
different. Yeah.
Well, exactly. But that's the thing. Like, I think it's just really interesting to find out these things
Yeah.
about how people work because it highlights to everybody who's listening that it's not about what Fred does, it's about what works for you. And that's what I think is a really cool thing. So, yeah. Right. Next question. What is your favorite referencing management system? Oh, your face was a picture.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Probably
Which do you use then?
EndNote, because that's what we have at work. EndNote. But I have dabbled with Zotero
Okay.
as well. But EndNote.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. It's
In all
definitely.
honesty, the good old manual would still be the best, but if you have too many references, your life would be a nightmare. So not a good idea.
Oh, I like. I think one of my super secret weapons is EndNote, and a little bit like I'm not like a super user of EndNote, but I probably know how to use it more than the average
Mm.
person. And my favorite thing to do is if somebody is like, "Oh, can you change it from being Harvard to Vancouver?" And I like can do it in under 2 seconds, and they're like, "Wow."
Yeah. I could do that in EndNote. Yeah. Yeah. EndNote. I think that's what I used also for my PhD as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes life easier. Cool.
it does.
What about when it comes to data visualization? Do you have a favorite tool for making graphs, figures, images for your publications?
No,
Oh,
particularly. Having
okay.
said that, I don't. I've my focus hadn't been um a lot on data part because I often work with more early career scientists who do a lot of that.
Okay.
Having said that, I've just learned how to use R. So I'm learning about the exciting opportunities there.
Ooh, I might have to ask you to email. Like, how did you learn R? Like,
Um,
was it a course or are you self-taught?
Well, so there's a course by there's a public health consultant who does these has online resources, and I've forgotten his name right now. So
Yeah.
I started. He was one that inspired. So I'd been talking about learning art because that's the language we're using at work, or colleagues are using at work, not me. And one of my new research focus is around learning data science. I'll tell you a little bit more. That's my NIHR
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
focus. Is my so I knew I had to learn R. And I just thought, where am I going to start from? I'm too old to be doing all of this. Why am
Yeah.
I doing this to myself? Anyways, so I listened to his podcast series, which is on YouTube as well. So that helped and just kind of
Okay.
inspired me to see the practical uses of it. And I didn't, then I got my teenage son to also get into, coding with the hope that, if he does it, then he may teach me. That didn't work. Eventually, I had to go on a course, a systematic review and meta-analysis course, and you had to use either R or Stata. I've used Stata in the past, and they were
Ah.
encouraging us to use R more. So I literally had 2 days to at least be able to use R to some level. So I called on a colleague at work and said, please, can you help me? And I'm not actually, I tried DataCamp as well. So DataCamp has
Yeah.
courses, but it's all written and it was it was a bit too much for me. But
Yeah.
anyways, in 1 hour with my colleague, I could use R and I could function in R. I can't
Wow.
obviously code fully, but I can function within R. So I'm
That's
quite excited.
impressive.
And I
Very
did do some,
inspiring.
design some graphs with some data.
Wow. Well, I might chase you up for on email, and for everybody who's listening or watching, in the description, if you can like provide the detail of the
I'll
course
send
and
you
maybe
the, yeah,
that YouTube channel
yes, I will.
that as well, that would be really, really
I'll
cool.
do that.
Excellent. All right. Next question. Favorite desk snack? Munching while you eat.
None, because I
Oh, well done.
ideally try to avoid snacking. But if I must, then I've got a massive bag of pistachios looking at me right now. So it'll be some sort of nuts.
Ooh, nice. Nice. I like it. I like it. Right, almost there. When planning or organizing, whether that's the outline of a paper or a project or your life, are you a digital person or are you a pen and paper person?
I would have said digital, and I still sort of
Ooh,
digital. So I
okay.
do like to type, but I've just got remarkable. And I'm not, I do not, they're not paying me for this. And actually, I thank another researcher, Rebecca Glover, who, and
Yeah.
another colleague when I went to a course in Portugal, who
Yeah.
had this, it's an e-book, it's an
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
e-tablet. And you just write, and I love it because it really feels like paper. So I have to say now, it's my remarkable.
Very cool. Do you have the newest one that actually has
No.
color?
No, I'm so upset
Oh,
because I bought it in December and I knew that had existed, but it wasn't quite in the UK yet, and I didn't want to
oh,
procrastinate anymore because
no.
then that
Don't.
meant I probably wouldn't get it. Having said that, this one does have, so I've got the Remarkable 2. It does have
Yeah.
an element of color, it's just not in the same way as the new one. But you know, I still love it.
Fair enough. I'm just a color person, so like I've got my eye on the new. I think it's called the Remarkable Ultra.
Pro, oh yeah, Pro, yeah.
Yeah,
I
Pro.
definitely, I would
Yeah,
say
yeah,
go
yeah.
for that one. Go for that one, definitely.
But like I've got to save up the money for it because
Yeah.
it's not
I did, I
cheap.
did, I did, I did think about, it was either the Remarkable, there's a Kobo one, and there's the Amazon one as well, but I
Yeah,
went for this in the end.
yeah. No, Remarkable to me looks the best. Right. Two more questions. What book are you currently reading?
Um, Non-specifically, but my
Okay,
Bible,
that's
I do
fine.
read my Bible,
Okay.
so that would have to count, but no other.
No
I've
other
got lots
books.
of books, yeah, and I go into my Kindle every so often and just pick up something and read through that.
No,
But
fair,
no specific book right now.
fair enough. Fair enough. And then last question is, who is a researcher who you admire?
Oh. Don't have a single person that comes to mind right now. However, the sorts of researchers that I admire are
Oh,
those
I like that.
who are combining their research with being clinicians
Okay.
and policy maybe, or those who are using research to influence policy. So not a single researcher, but there are so many that I admire, and I don't want to say one of them, but that
No,
those are
no,
the
it's
sorts
fine.
of people that I look up to,
Yeah.
and and particularly those who are breaking new ground. So I would say, and again, we may talk about this later. Pharmaceutical public health is where I'm trying to go into, and I remember that as I was thinking about that a few years ago, I was thinking, who has created a new specialty, or who has gone, particularly if they were pharmacists, has gone into a new area and remained a pharmacist and still pushing the boundaries through this. So I've got a couple of colleagues who have done it within health policy and also health
Okay.
economics. So
Oh,
I specifically
wow.
went to talk to them about how have you done this?
Okay, cool. I like that. I like that. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing all those little tidbits. I told you it wouldn't be scary. It's just a little bit of fun to try and get to have a little bit of a peek behind what your desk would look like was kind of what I was trying to think of when I was
Hmm.
asking these questions without asking anybody to show their desk because that I feel is a bit too intimate.
You should add hot chocolate to it though, because that's my actual drink. My daily drink now is hot chocolate
Ooh.
in the morning, but tea is still my favorite, but I do have hot chocolate sometimes or
Yeah, fair
mocha.
enough. Fair enough. Who doesn't love chocolate? Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Anyway, um, what I'd like to ask you now is, and I think your answer around who your research heroes is like a bit of a perfect segue because you were talking about this idea in the UK. We talk about them generically as these clinical academics. So people who retain a connection to their clinical speciality, their clinical environment, but who are also doing research, potentially doing policy advocacy work, things like that. So, what was it for you as a pharmacist that made you think, huh, what about this thing called research?
So should I take you back a journey?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to start when I was probably before I went to university, I had an inkling that I definitely wanted to be in health. So that was standard.
Okay.
Then I went off to do my first degree as a pharmacist, a pharmacy degree. And
Yeah.
during that time, in my second year, for some reason, I applied for a summer placement
Oh.
in a pharmacology lab, and did a summer research placement in, I think it was my second year, yeah, in a pharmacology lab, and really enjoyed that. I was surrounded, although I was only a second year student, the PhD students, the research fellows really just took me on, and I was
Oh.
part of the team, and they really supported me. And that was really interesting because the skills I gained there, and I wrote up my research, my summer placement. I don't know, remember if I had to, but I did. It was paid, it was a paid summer placement, so that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And I wrote it up, and so that linked me to seeing how PhD theses were written because I was surrounded by
Okay.
PhD students. But when I
Okay.
did my final year project, I did it in pharmaceutics, and I got the first prize overall for the whole
Oh,
year
wow.
out of about more
Congratulations.
than I think 150 students, I think it was. And I think it was because of just being around those people who inspired me as researchers.
Mhm.
Then I went off to do my residency at Oxford Radcliffe Hospitals. It's really interesting you talk about the night shift. I particularly went there because I didn't want a 9 to 5 job. I wanted a shift pattern job
Oh.
again because I know when I work best and I needed
Yep.
flexibility.
Yeah.
And so we had middle of the night, we were there 9 to 9, and that was our shift pattern.
Okay.
Um, and so I did that, and I got my diploma in clinical pharmacy. And then I thought it was time to go off and do my PhD. At the same time, my boyfriend then had started his PhD in another university, I think Essex. He was in Essex. And I went off to UCL School of Pharmacy and did my PhD again in pharmaceutics because I was interested. So
Yeah.
I did that. Having said that, I did that and I finished, and I said, I don't want to work in academia. I don't want to work in industry. So because those are the two options if you went into
Yeah.
research those days. So I went back into hospital because I actually did love being in a hospital setting. Having
That's
said that,
so interesting.
thank you. Yeah. So I got back into hospital. Obviously, my PhD was in pharmaceutics, not pharmacy practice. Then the question was, how am I going to apply all these skills I've got in practice? So what I decided was to use the skills and the research skills and embed them within my clinical practice. I didn't know how to do it because it's really interesting because in those days, so we're talking 2008, 2009,
Hmm.
it wasn't visible what could be done, like, at least not that I could see within the hospital
Okay.
that I went into. But I had skills on how to do literature review, and you had skills on how to do data collection and analysis. So I started with small audits.
Yeah.
Thankfully, about the same time, in our pharmaceutical journal, I was seeing a particular name pop up quite a bit, who was
Hmm.
in a hospital setting. I think she was at King's College then, and her name attracted me. It was Raliata Notade, and I could see that she was publishing research in practice. So I just started
Ah.
seeing what she was doing and thinking, okay, well, if she's doing this, then must be possible. So I asked the question, can I write up my audit in a journal? And
Yeah.
thankfully, the microbiologist and the pharmacist and the chief pharmacist agreed. So then I had to relearn how do you write a
Yeah.
clinical paper for
Yeah.
research into a journal. And so I did that. And I think that kind of started my journey into, okay, so this is possible to build some level of research skills within clinical practice. And that's how I started, very, very small audit, writing up my audit.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because the audit I wrote up and published, the project was not new to the country, but nobody else had written about it and published about it. So then I
Right.
got emails from very, very senior colleagues that I admired and thought they were wow, and asking me for the papers. So I thought, okay, fine. But I said all I did was to be the one to just write this up. I'm sure other people have done this. So that's how I started into, I guess, research in practice in a way.
That's really
And
interesting. So, like, I'm going to put my hand up. I'm a nurse. I know a little bit about pharmacy, but I don't know like the educational pathway for a pharmacist. Um, and for me, like hearing you speak about your journey and how, like, although like from a very early phase in your educational journey, like you fell in love or you became enticed by research, that actually when you did that training, that made you go, well, maybe not so much, but it was that reintroduction of taking those very academically developed skills and applying them to your clinical data. Because in nursing and in clinical academics in general, it's sort of encouraged to do the opposite way around. So you're encouraged to start small with like a quality improvement project or a clinical audit, and then grow and do your PhD. So it's really interesting that for you, it was the other way around.
It was the other way around. And so by the time I finished my PhD, I think I'd written about 4 publications, all in pharmaceutics. So I was having to relearn. But yes, it was the other way around for me. I think the only thing I always say to colleagues, you don't have to know what you want, just know what you don't want. And all I knew was that I didn't want to go into industry, and I didn't want to go, at that point, I didn't want to go into full-time academia. And I loved hospital, so I went back into hospital. And I was lucky that I was surrounded by other healthcare professionals who were willing to work with me and train me. So then after being in the hospital for a while, I then moved into what was Health Protection Agency. Which has now become UKHSA, the 3rd iteration. So we were Health Protection Agency, then Public Health England, and now UKHSA. And in that, for many years, I was the only pharmacist in my division. And I was surrounded by medical colleagues who, as you know, are very much into clinical practice and research. So I didn't know any different, I have to say. It's just what you do, and it's just what they did. And so often they would say, we've done this, so Diane, write it up. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I started small and, wrote up my first, they helped me a lot, wrote up my first couple of peer review publications. What I learned over time, though, was the importance of using those research skills to underpin our projects. And so that's what I have done in practice is so I wouldn't say that I've gone into full-time research, because I work, my main role is not about research. It wasn't until when I became an NIHR award. But it was making sure that I embed research skills into every project that I do. So what's the literature saying? And then once we have the literature, what's the data? And then how do we make sure we put it through peer review? And for me, the peer review was really important, because what I found was that when we do projects and we write up reports, what we do is a dump. We write everything, we put all the information in. But when you have to write it as a peer review publication, you have to make sure that you're using the right frameworks. And if you use the right frameworks, you have to make sure that you actually have a story that you're telling and what are the key recommendations. And so that was important for me. So that's, I guess, my journey so far into embedding research within my practice over the years.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that. Before we move forward and kind of talk about, because you've hinted and you said in your introduction, like such a long list of different roles that you hold. Before we do that, just to help everybody else out there, because you use this word a lot so far, what is pharmaceutics? And how is it different from being a pharmacist?
Yeah, pharmaceutics is really around the formulation of medicines.
Okay, so like the actual like makeup of that medication, and then how that makeup of the medication then would affect like its uptake into a human, or how it's activated, or where it goes, and how it's utilized in the body.
Drug delivery, of medications. So it focuses on formulation, development, and manufacturing of the drug. So my PhD focused on excipients, the impact of excipients on medicines. And mine was on H2 antagonists, so ranitidine and cimetidine. So, and what I found, I used PEG 400, which is one of the excipients. I found that there was a difference between males and females in the role of the excipients. And so this is in 2008. Well, I submitted my thesis in 2008. 2009, I submitted my thesis.
Okay, so PhD done, moved into hospital working, now starting to pull the skills from your PhD and embed research into sort of, yes, your clinical role, but also your beginning of developing, and not just having that as a foundational skill, but using that skill to start to share and disseminate with the rest of the world around the work that you were doing, not just you independently, but your team were
Colleagues,
doing
definitely
in the
team.
hospital within a clinical setting relating back to pharmaceutics and pharmacy in general.
Pharmacy at that point, not pharmaceutics. So in that
Okay,
point, it
just
was clinical
pharmacy at that point.
pharmacy, clinical pharmacy, yeah.
Okay, so then fast forward to 2025, and you now have 4 jobs. Plus your well, like, because you also hold a very high level NIHR award, which I know is relatively new, and being a mum as well. So how did you collect so many jobs? And how did all of those different roles that you now have end up with you holding this NIHR award?
Okay, so I only actually have 2 jobs, so that two organizations pay my salary, and that's UKHSA as a lead pharmacist for AMR and as deputy chief scientist for Royal Pharmaceutical Society.
Okay.
My other roles actually are honorary, are unpaid, are
Okay.
things I do, and I've done a whole range over times, including working with WHO.
Okay.
But one of the things I did do actually, and I think it's an important point to raise, is that, as I said, I knew I didn't want a 9 to 5 job. So what I did was to always have about a day or half a day that I wasn't paid by anyone specifically, to allow
Oh.
me the flexibility to either take on new roles, or because I wanted to stretch in that area, to develop in that area, or to build my research skills. So examples of how I've done that. So for a few years, I worked for Health Education England.
Yeah.
Did that for a while. And then another time I worked with Commonwealth Pharmacists Association for about 3 years. And also worked with WHO, again, unpaid, as a consultant to help develop a particular policy document. And then in that one day that I have is what I'm using now for the Royal Pharmaceutical Society as a deputy chief
Okay.
scientist.
Ah.
And then in terms of other things, I did them outside of work. But they're not all the time. They don't need me every single week. So my role as the honorary professor at University of Nottingham is around research collaboration. So some of that is linked in with my role at UKHSA.
Yeah.
So if we've got collaborations, that's fine. We've written a grant together,
Yeah.
for example, then that would be costed in within UKHSA, or it will be separate and done. I deliver a lecture, I do that in my own time. But I have other committee roles, like the chair of one of the subgroups of the European Society for Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, and that's done at the weekends and Sundays. Well, weekends and after work. So that's what I do. But I think I'm blessed by the different roles because I enjoy them. Why do I have the multiple roles? That I love what I do as a pharmacist in infections. I feel like I'm hopefully adding value. So they don't actually feel like work.
Okay.
Now, to go back to your question, how has it got me to where I am today? That's your
Yeah.
question. I think the various skills have been really important and kept me passionate about what I do. I think if you ask me about what now having the NIHR, I think that was your main question, now having the NIHR. I think what's happened is over the years, I've never had dedicated research time to be able to focus.
Okay.
So I've used all the projects that I lead on. I've embedded research skills within those. I've trained others to be able to do that. And we work through the process of making sure that we put things through peer review so that there's a level of rigor. And that's important for policy, because what I find when we're coming to influence policies, that if we don't have the peer review publications or the evidence, it's very difficult. So that helps. And so it's a soapbox I get on, is that we need to make sure that we are putting things through the rigor.
Yeah.
So I've never really had, apart from when I did my PhD, not had that dedicated time. On and off, I may be on part of a grant as a contributor, where there's 0.5% or 0.025% or something that is there. So when this opportunity came, it's the NIHR Senior Clinical and Practitioner Award. When that opportunity came, it really gave me the opportunity to apply and have dedicated time for research. So 2 days a week within my 4 days with the UKHSA, is now focused on research.
Okay.
And that's great because what I'm doing is something completely different to what I've done in the past. I'm surrounded by epidemiologists. I've written papers and worked and led projects that require the epidemiology skills. And I have a master's in public health, so I do have a level of training
Okay.
on epidemiology. But what I haven't done before is the actual analysis of data to the level that some do. I don't plan to become an analyst or a full-time epidemiologist. But what I felt was important is I needed to increase my skills in health data science and use of our
Mm,
electronic health records. And so
mm,
my NIHR is focused on helping me to increase my skills, because I feel that as a leader, that would help me to lead in a better way and
hmm.
help me to support colleagues in a different way as well. And I'm really seeing that already now through a range of things internally. So in the past, when they start to talk about the databases that we have and the range of, I just used to switch off. That's not my problem. But now I'm like, okay, I need to understand a little bit more about that. And I recently learned I learned how to use R. So,
Yeah.
that's very different. And from next week, I'm going on a course at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for 5 weeks around analysis of electronic health records.
Ooh.
So, yes, it's been a journey to get here.
Yeah.
Over time, as I said, it's building research skills and really using my own time to try and make sure that I engage in research. I've been very lucky that even through all of that, I was able to be involved, either mostly leading or supervising others, or being the first author across more than 100 manuscripts that have been published.
Hmm.
So it's been a long journey to get here, but I'm really grateful that there is now this NIHR opportunity that just gives me that opportunity. As I said, if I didn't have this, I wouldn't be upskilling in
Yeah.
health data science. I would just carry on embedding.
Yeah. But I think like that's such an important story to share because I think there's, well, I'll put my hand up. I know that I definitely had before I started like talking not just to you, but other people who've been on the podcast, a preconceived idea that the only way really to have a really strong publication history and lots of different peer reviewed publications is to have paid protected research time. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize that actually obtaining that protected time is down to your ability to get that individual fellowships. In the UK, NIHR, other countries have got different
Mhm.
acronyms, and that there's a lot of work and a lot of success that people have that is exactly how you've described it, in that you embed it into existing roles. And I loved how you said this actually, because I think like everybody who's in research, we all work outside of our normal working patterns and working hours. But I love how you have protected and structured a small portion of your time to give yourself a little bit more freedom in order to be able to do that without it costing so much from a personal point of view. So thank you for sharing that. But that brings me on to my next question. And you said in the Rapid 11 that it's not about balance, it's about blend. Because although, yes, all right, you have two jobs technically, and one of them is sort of now kind of three, because the NIHR thing is taken over 2 days of one of your jobs, plus all of the other things that you do in your free time. Being a mom, having teenage sons, and probably you want to do things like relax
Of
periodically,
course. And cook.
possibly see your husband, go on a
Yeah.
date, those things in life. So how do you, and I'm going to use your word, how do you blend it all so that you are the lovely, happy person that you are and not somebody that kind of has a bit of a twitch in one eye?
I get that. I feel like I need to really sit down and come up with a clear answer for that question, because it's something I get asked by
Yeah.
my mentees especially. And I call it a blend because it really is a mishmash. But one of the things that obviously is that the two roles that I'm paid to do, I have to make sure that that's done,
Yeah.
and that there's no um, flexibility around that. Um, However, with all the others, because I choose what I enjoy as well, and what I think, not just enjoy, but they are important. They're things I believe are important. So I won't have the same level of focus on all of them at the same time. And I think we have to accept that. So I can't have the same level of focus on all my apart from the paid roles, but on all the additional roles at the same time. So I think that that's been important. And with the SGAP role, which is the European one, for example, I talk about, I will do that at the weekends. Again, by choice, because I feel it's important. I wouldn't take on a role if I didn't think it was important.
Yeah.
And again, when I say I do it at the weekends, I'm not spending the whole weekend on it every week.
Yeah.
There's something important we need to get, and I have to just be more effective in how I do this. So I think for me, the key things is I take on projects that will stretch me, and there's a developmental point to it for me. So then I invest my time in it. I also, I know where my strengths are, and what, so I'm either doing it because it's a strength area for me. Actually, it's not going to be not going to cause me too much pain. So anything around infections, AMR, I've been in this field for a long time.
Yeah.
So if suddenly somebody comes to me to do something on AI, for example, that's going to, if I take that on, then I know it's a stretch project. So what am I going to drop to allow me to take that on?
Right.
So those are some of the things I'm thinking of consistently.
Yeah.
I do have a faith. I believe in God. So I do believe that I have a strength and a source that comes from that as well. That helps me. I think I watched my mom growing up, being a working mother. So for me, working and raising children is the norm. She's a lawyer, retired now. So, and my aunties as well, and the women that surrounded me all were working women. So it's not a big deal. It's just what happened.
You know what though, like you say you need to figure out a better way to answer it, but actually I think you've answered it beautifully, because you had a foundation of role modeling.
Yeah.
And so none of this blending or balancing feels unusual, because it's the environment that you grew up in. And I think that plays a really strong role. And then I also really like how you used very specific words around, like, I will categorize, I will say yes and no to stuff based on how it's important, how it fits into my skill set, what it will do for others or do for my career. And then I allocate that time appropriately. And I think that's actually a really beautiful way of describing how you do it. That for me, I'm like, oh, actually, I think I do that. Apart from the role modeling, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but like everything else, you look at something, you're like, oh, that one might stretch me a little bit, or I need to tap into this resource to make that happen. Who can I bring alongside to make it more productive? And it is much more of a blend rather than a balance, which I really
One
like
more thing
that.
to add
I've
is
never thought of that.
Blend, yeah. One more thing to add is obviously, because I do have children, and so I'm not on my own. I do have a partner, husband, who does do an important share of making sure that, because if I didn't have that, I may have to think about things in a very different way. And when they were much younger, I also had, my mum around who was able to do some when we were both full-time working and in the office. So I think people, if others are thinking, how can I do this? I think it's understanding what your situation is, and then really trying to work out what you can or can't do. One thing I will say is hopefully that we have less people leaning out and coming out of what they want to do. So if they desire to work and have a family, that they can do it. Some people want to be full-time stay-at-home mom, and some people don't. And I think it's knowing what we want. There are some books that I've read over time that have really helped me as well, to know that I'm not mad and that it's okay and this can be done. So that's also helped.
I love that. Some books that made me realize I wasn't mad. True. We all need books like that in our lives. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Diane. I found that really, really helpful. Just looking at the time and how quickly this hour is whizzing on by, I want to now switch gears a little bit and talk about in our private conversation that we were having in emails about this, you'd mentioned that there's a piece of work that you've recently submitted and you've done it, you've ticked the box and did the work behind the box around this. It's not that new, but post-COVID new thing when it comes to publishing, called pre-printing an article. And having not yet been brave enough to press that button myself, I was hoping that you might be willing to share with me, selfishly, but as well as with everybody else who's listening, like, why preprint and how did you go about deciding to do that for this particular article?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to talk about the history to the article first. So the article is based on a project called Pharmaceutical Public Health. So in 2020, before COVID, I was asked to lead on an evidence review of pharmaceutical public health by the chief pharmaceutical officers. And so I started the project, and I always laugh and joke to myself that I feel like I did a mini PhD in this short project that it was meant to be. And we had a systematic review done. I did that in collaboration with other colleagues in an organization called FAST. 2 surveys, one for pharmacists and one for public health professionals. And then we had workshops to come up with recommendations. So that was the process.
Okay.
So I did this in 2020. So actually pre-COVID, and then COVID hit in March. So I was asked to do it in January and starting the process. And then obviously lockdown came in March. So I couldn't start it until September. So anyways, come September, I started the project and I finished the project, I think I was looking through my emails. I think by 2021, I was ready to report on the findings, and I was reporting on the findings to the Pharmacy Advisory Group for NHS England and the Chief Pharmaceutical Officers, and also to Faculty of Public Health. And I had a report written as well, a lovely 250-page report in collaboration with colleagues. So that was all done. So that was all I was asked to do. Done.
Yep.
However, for me, I felt that if you just have a report, often what happens is it sits on folders, it sits on a website.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for people to know the validity of it, and especially when it's quite a long report.
Yeah.
So what do we do? But and I've been working alongside colleagues, and because it wasn't my main role. So it's not my main role. I was commissioned to do it. And it's a specialty area that is not yet fully formed within pharmacy.
Okay.
Having said that, it was first defined in 2000, so 25 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a definition for pharmaceutical public health. But over the years, we've just had different processes, and we are where we are now. I felt that it was really important to get this into peer review.
Okay.
And I've been trying to draft it, but because I did it as a it's quite a big project and lots of results. So how do you then synthesize this down into 3,000 words?
Yep.
And that became the challenge. And so I just went back and forth for a minute. And also by the time, all the colleagues who worked with me were all volunteers. So they'd moved on. Yep. And, they'd dedicated their time, and we'd done the project, we'd done the report, and they'd moved on. So it was really up to me now. And we'd done what we were asked to do. But I really felt that it was important to get it to peer review. So I've been writing. In the meantime of writing this, I think I keep joking that I've had probably 20 other publications, because I had accountability, and they were linked to my roles, and so we've done other parts and got it through. So this has been in the background. So by the time it came to submitting it, the data was from 2021, I think. So that's when we did the surveys. Yeah. It's a bit older now.
Yeah.
So there is no urgency, and it's not really new data. So for me, and I wanted to make sure that it got through so they could start to be used and cited, because we didn't have the report on a website either then. So that was one of my reasons for preprint. And since COVID, preprints have become more acceptable. Yeah. People have gone back since the end of the pandemic as we knew it. Yeah. There is now a reluctance for people to use the preprint again. So the way I think about it when I'm thinking about preprint, just for those who don't know, preprints are research papers which are shared publicly whilst you're undergoing peer review, formal peer review, and publication in a journal. There are different advantages and disadvantages to it. So advantages is the rapid dissemination and open access, because it is very clear that it's not been peer reviewed, and it clearly says that there. Most journals will now give you the option to actually submit to preprint when you submit to them. So it's a little bit easier, whereas before you had to go to a different platform to submit it before you can. So I tend to now use, and many of us will have data that we've just had that just sat there for a long time and we've just not got round to writing. So that's where I kind of, those sort of data I would put through preprint now.
Interesting. Okay.
Partly because, you know, sometimes journal may still say we're not having this. It's the data is so old, depending on how you frame it. But because the one I've done, and actually I can say now that this particular paper has now been accepted, and I've just submitted the proofread version yesterday night before this. So that's gone through. But because the data was really unique in the sense of it's not been done before, I think the journal was willing to consider it, but they may not have been. So preprint means that it can be out there and it can be visible and people can use it. Sometimes people use it when they have really important data. They want to make sure it's known immediately.
Yeah.
But there is that part that it hasn't been peer reviewed. So, and there's a quality concern. So the final version that we're going to have is quite a bit different to the preprint because we've gone through a painful peer review process, which is great. I love it because it means that when I know that it's published, it's had the rigor that we wanted to do. Some journals don't want them, so we have to be careful because if we put it through preprint 1 and the journal rejects it and we go somewhere else, they may not want it. But that's unusual now. Very few journals will reject on the basis of you've had preprints because it's very clear that it's preprint.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of, so I've got another project on at the moment where it's data that we're about to submit, and colleagues and I were discussing, will we put it through preprint or not? And that's not going to go to preprint because for me, we have time, but there's no urgency to submit it. So that's kind of how I think through it.
I never thought of that urgency from a point of view of it being older data. I always thought of it from a point of view of this is really important and everybody needs to know this kind of thing. So it's really interesting hearing that perspective from you, because I think, like, for me, I've been much more hesitant to press the preprint button because I'm just like slightly terrified about that whole, well, it gets out there and it's not peer reviewed, and what happens if it gets rejected, and then you can't find a home for it, and like all of those other sorts of things, because I'm very keen to have that peer review process in the work that I'm doing. So it's kind of, I think, reassuring, but also it's made me think of it in a different way than what I have before, because I've always ubiquitously just said, no, it's not for me, because a lot of the research that I've done, while it's important, it's not time critical, if that makes sense. There isn't that sense of urgency around it. But I supervise a pharmacist with a bunch of other people, and she, as part of her PCAF, did a scoping literature review, and she hit the preprint button on that, and I was like, oh, you're so brave.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance, because so from someone who works within an organization where policy is important, sometimes that's also important because it means that the information is out there that can be used to at least start to think, not necessarily make the final policy decision, but to start to see that. And I always say to colleagues, pure researchers, sometimes if you wait too long, the opportunity to influence has sailed.
Yeah.
And so it's always a balance.
Yeah. And I think again that you've struck a real note on that for me, and like I'm now genuinely looking at this whole idea of preprint slightly differently. I'm like, maybe I should hit the button the next time I hit submit. I've got this one paper where I've been trying to get it published for quite a while now, and it's a really unusual paper, and it's like this blend of, like, it's actual research, but it's theory building research, and it's just really hard to get published because very few publications will publish theory, let alone a theory building publication. So it makes it really hard, and I feel really bad because I feel like it needs to be out there, and I've been thinking about the preprint thing because getting old now as well.
It's out there and it's citable. and people will know that it's not peer reviewed, but at least it gives information that they can use. Some systematic reviews will accept preprints and some will say no preprints. So it really will depend. But I think sometimes it's that balance of what we want the information so that people can use it, so that they're not reinventing the wheel. So it's always a balance of hoarding the information, or do we have it out there so that people can use it, so it's beneficial for patients and the public. And what with preprint, so you need, I can't remember offhand, I don't know if you can always have reviews in there or if it has to be data type papers. So there is some limitations on what can be submitted for preprint. So it's just checking if it meets that.
But anyway, that's cool. Thank you very, very much. Just looking at the time, my last question that I'd like to ask you before we wrap up this action-packed, like so dense this episode, so grateful for you coming on, is what would your advice, top tips be to other pharmacists who might be at that first student placement position, who might be listening to this because they're a little bit research curious and they're hearing the word research a lot more now in their clinical environment, in their education environment? What would your advice be to them? Because obviously things have changed quite drastically from when you did it, because when you did it, clinical academic didn't exist and now it does exist. So what would your advice be to a pharmacist who's like, I like the sound of this?
Start. I always say, every pharmacist who qualifies, and pharmacists definitely who qualifies, but also they're pharmacy technicians. So together with pharmacy professionals, we do have a level of research skills within our training. Definitely every pharmacist will have had to do a level of dissertation, which will be research focused. So we do have that. So if you've been qualified in the last 3 to 4 years, you definitely remember those skills, or should remember those skills. For colleagues who have been qualified a bit longer, they may feel like they don't have the skills. But I would challenge them in that, because whilst audit is not research, you can use research skills within that. And research can become something that everybody does, or using research skills. Some people would want to go to the advanced level and to consultant level, so very advanced stages, and that's why I'm not talking about those. So I'll say if you're starting out new, is what do you do is start, ask for help. When I went back into clinical practice, it was the microbiologists and other pharmacists who were doing audits, and I thought, okay, can we do this in a slightly different way? I would say there's a lot of help out there now, and the research is definitely being talked about across all professions. And so seek for support through different groups. The Royal Pharmaceutical Society has a lot of research guides available that people can use. We also have e-learning, which is for all pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. For those who don't know where to start, it really starts to give you the initial skills that you need and a reminder. I would say there's no perfect time. You just have to have a go. Read around and see what people are doing. I saw someone's name and I just saw what she was doing, and that helped me. There are opportunities for funding, and there's a range of places. You don't have to go to NIHR as your first level. You can do if you feel like you do, but it is competitive. And so you may want to start off with charity funds. You may want to start off within your hospitals, what funds are available to just give you some protected time for projects. People often think that they're going to get full research time to do research. I always say that even the academics who are in universities don't have full research time purely to do research. And often they are combining it with teaching. They're combined, and even if they're in a research focused role, pure research focused role, but even they, I'm sure, will have to do some of that in their own time. I'm not suggesting that people should do everything in their own time, but I think if it's something you're passionate about, in the same way as your professional development, you have to invest in it, then it's think about how do you invest your time for that. There is also the credentialing process that helps you see how you can, within pharmacy, how you can build your skills across core, advanced, and then advanced, and then consultant level from a research perspective. So to summarize, we can all embed, and we should all be embedding research skills because we want to do the best for our patients, and we should be evidence-based. We're an evidence-based profession. I would say ask for help. Look around, go to your research office within your hospital or your organization and ask. For colleagues in community pharmacy and in primary care, there's a little bit more challenge, but I still think it's possible. And I think it's about reaching out. Pharmacy Research UK and RPS both have mentoring schemes. For pharmacy technicians, I'm sure if they reach out to APT UK, who's their professional body, they can also signpost them into the right directions. I'm in the science and research team for the RPS. And so we're really there to support pharmacists, and we're in terms of how they build their research capacity. So people can also reach out to us. And as I said, we've got the research guides and the e-learning platforms for both pharmacists and pharmacy technicians.
That's great. Thank you so much, Diane. And thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing all of your really great advice about blending and how to get started in research. I really, really enjoyed hearing about your journey, hearing a little bit of your research. Oh, just for everybody out there, remember, I always put in more details into the episode description, and in there, in addition to where you can find Diane online, a little bit more about her bio and all of those roles that she holds, plus four of her publications that she's picked out of her 120 plus that she has as just a bit of a taster to try and get to know a little bit more about her research. So definitely check that out. Diane, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for giving your time to this podcast. And yeah, it was great to get to chat to you.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed having a chat with you. Really, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I will speak to you again soon, okay? Bye.
Speak to you soon. Bye.
Don't go away. Up next, we have the top 3 takeaways from this week's podcast by Dr. Rosalind Austin.
She packs so much into that episode and so much into her life. Wow, I'm inspired. Yeah, it was great. Like, we covered so much from like her journey into research, a little bit, just a taster of some of the research that she does, how she maintains not balance, but blend within all the different roles that she has. And then just a little quick, like, top tips around preprints when it comes to publishing your research. So yeah, so much. It was really hard to pick my top 3 takeaways for this episode. But I settled on the following. Number 1, your journey is as unique as you are. I loved hearing how for her, rather than her clinical audits leading to a PhD, that actually her PhD led her to clinical audits. It was just a really unique story that I hadn't heard yet. And it was really just refreshing and a real good reminder for me anyway, that our journeys into research are unique, and our own unique careers, our backgrounds can all make that journey just as special as we are. And that, yes, it's important to have structure. Yes, having an established pathway can be really helpful, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way. So yeah, I really liked that one. Number 2 is, and Number 2, just follow a lead and start. And I think it goes back to, like, I sometimes remember to ask the question at the end of the episode, like, just ask why, just be curious. And for me, her describing how, she was reading this paper and this one name kept popping up. And so she reached out to that person and started talking to them. And that was sort of the kickoff to how she took her PhD skills and embedded them into her clinical world. But it goes the same for lots of what other guests have said. They just had that itch they had to scratch. So they had this lead, this idea, this inspiring person, this novel or index event, And that was the thing that, they couldn't leave alone. And so they started to think, they started to build research skills. And I thought, that's a really good, but also really important thing to remember, that it's sometimes not about waiting for, the perfect skill set to come to fruition, that actually it can just be about taking that first step and following that curiosity. Be like Alice in Wonderland and just go down the rabbit hole. Right. Third is around preprints. And I kind of talked about it in the episode with Diane, that for me, I've not been brave enough to hit that preprint button, because I just, yes, I've read about it and yes, I understood it, but to me, in describing the purpose for a preprint, the word urgency or it needing to get out there, I had tied that term to its importance for clinical outcomes. So some of the COVID research and sort of like that, the preprint became a real more accepted practice through the COVID pandemic, in order to get those early results out there so that we could start to treat patients a bit faster than what we normally would. But I never really felt like that applied to me or my research. And it was really interesting, because for her, she uses the term, or chose to use the term as urgency, being around not just about that urgent clinical need, but actually, the timing around policies, or because for one reason or another that data might be considered old or things, that it still gives you a platform to get that research, to get those results out there. And it was a really fresh way, for me anyway, to think about how to use that preprint platform as a different way to try and promote some of the research that you're doing. So I might have to revisit the rules and regulations around preprints, and maybe I'll get brave and press that button. What about you? Have you pressed the preprint button? Do you have an experience of pressing the preprint button and then getting rejected and then having troubles publishing? Because between you and me, that's my biggest fear. Let me know. Tell me your experiences in the comments below. I'd really like to hear about how preprint has been for you and what was good, bad, or otherwise about it. This is a little bit of a longer episode, so I'm going to wrap things up. I tried to go through the top 3 takeaways a bit quicker than normal. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and talk about this podcast to other clinicians if you found this inspiring. If you know a pharmacist, send this out to them. Whatever you can do to try and help increase the impact of this little podcast that we have on research. Thank you to everybody who's made it this far. Thank you to everybody who's been commenting on YouTube recently. It's really fun to see what you think of the episode. So yeah, let me know. That's it for now. I will see you all again in 3 weeks' time. And until then, keep asking why.